Across the many stories woven through Adventure Time and its alternate universe reflections, few character pairings carry as much narrative depth as Marceline and her parallel counterpart, Marshall Lee. Their connection is not one of shared history, nor one that exists through direct interaction. Instead, it is a connection born from the structure of two worlds that exist beside one another. Marceline lives within the true timeline of Ooh, shaped by centuries of survival, loss, and love. Marshall lives within the fictional space, imagined in the mind of the Ice King, shaped not by lived experience, but by interpretation, memory, and fantasy. Together, they form a mirror where one reflects the real emotional weight of the world, while the other reflects the stylized version born from someone trying to retell it. This mirror is not literal. It grows from the way the two characters occupy similar roles within their respective universes. Each takes the position of a rebellious vampire, with musical talent, sharp humor, and a presence that shifts between intimidating and endearing. Yet beneath these surface traits lies a profound difference in how each identity forms. Marceline evolves through real experiences that begin long before the world of Ooh takes its modern shape. Her life stretches from the early days of the Mushroom War into an age defined by magic and mutation. She carries emotional scars shaped by abandonment, friendship, and the long journey toward finding a place where she belongs. Marshall, by contrast, emerges from a story written within the Ice King's fantasies, shaped by exaggerated personality traits and constructed for entertainment rather than survival. Understanding the mirror formed between them requires understanding what makes the two worlds different. Ooh is the result of a catastrophic transformation that reshaped the Earth long before Finn and Jake began their adventures. It is a world where time stretches in unusual ways, where magic fills the air, and where trauma and joy mix into a complex emotional landscape. It is this world that raises Marceline. Every moment of her life is built from contact with real danger, real affection, real loss, and real growth. She becomes a character defined by depth because her narrative allows her to change over time, to face consequences, and to live through the emotional challenges that shape a person. Marshall exists in a world that does not carry the same emotional history. His universe forms as an imaginative projection created by the Ice King, influenced by his memories, his storytelling impulses, and the fractured nature of his identity. This world does not hold the same weight because it is a simplified reflection of Ooh, filtered through the mind of someone whose grasp on reality has shifted dramatically. Within this narrative space, characters become stylized. Their personalities become shaped by dramatic flair, comedic exaggeration, and themes that allow the world to function as a playful inversion of the one where Marceline truly lives. Marshall, therefore, does not grow through centuries or face life-altering challenges. He reflects traits that the Ice King perceives in Marceline, not traits that arise from a long life of real experiences. This dynamic creates a fascinating comparison. Marceline represents what happens when a character is shaped by the world around her. Marshall represents what happens when a character is shaped by perception. Marceline's identity contains contradictions that reflect real emotional conflict. She carries strength and vulnerability, anger and compassion, independence and longing. Marshall carries confidence and charm wrapped in a persona designed to entertain. He reveals hints of depth, but these hints are not tied to a long timeline of lived moments. They exist because the fictional universe he inhabits demands that he be both familiar and slightly different from his real-world counterpart. The mirror concept becomes clearer when considering how the Ice King, known as Simon under his true identity, relates to Marceline. Simon plays a significant role in her early life, protecting her during the chaotic aftermath of the Mushroom War. Even after the crown erodes his memories, a faint emotional connection remains in the deepest parts of his mind. When he creates the Fionna and Cake universe, he draws unconsciously from memories buried beneath layers of magical influence. His reinterpretations of characters are shaped by fragments of familiarity and emotional residue. Marshall Lee becomes a filter through which the Ice King expresses traits he recognizes in Marceline, though he cannot consciously articulate them. This makes Marshall a narrative echo of Marceline's identity, shaped not by truth but by remembrance, warped by time and magic. This relationship highlights the most important part of the mirror between Marceline and Marshall. One character reflects the truth of who Marceline becomes. The other reflects how someone who once knew her partly remembers and partly imagines her. This gives Marshall an identity grounded in admiration, projection, and fantasy. His confidence, swagger, and charm represent exaggerated versions of Marceline's personality traits, reshaped to fit a fictional context. His portrayal captures the idea of a vampire who is cool, untouchable, stylish, and effortlessly powerful. These qualities resemble Marceline, but they lack the emotional nuance behind her actions. Where Marceline experiences fear, grief, and the lingering pain of abandonment, Marshall moves through the world with a carefree attitude because his universe does not require anything deeper. This does not make Marshall shallow. It simply means he reflects the expectations of the universe he inhabits. The Fionna and Cake world is built like a storybook, filled with heightened drama and playful contrast. Within this space, Marshall exists as a character designed to be entertaining, charismatic, and mischievous. His conflicts do not reach the depth of Marceline's, because the narrative does not revolve around centuries of lived history. Instead, it revolves around immediate interactions, stylized behavior, and the appeal of seeing familiar personalities reflected through a new lens. Marshall fits the world perfectly because he is shaped entirely by its rules. Marceline, however, is shaped by rules that extend beyond her universe's structure. She is not simply a character within a story. She is a character whose life spans different eras, shaped by events that define the history of Ooo. Her identity carries the weight of survival and the pain of watching the world change while she continues to live. This gives her emotional depth that cannot be replicated in a fictional universe created by another character. Her relationships grow through time, loss, and reconciliation. Her personality evolves because she allows herself to change. When she expresses emotion, it carries the gravity of centuries. When she acts out of fear or anger, those emotions mirror past experiences and unresolved feelings that shape her decisions. Marshall's emotional expressions do not carry the same gravity because they are not tied to real loss or real healing. His world does not require him to face centuries of sadness, abandonment, or redemption. His identity reflects confidence built from narrative design rather than lived difficulty. He takes on a cool persona that plays with danger without confronting consequences. This difference allows him to exist as a fun, energetic counterpart to Marceline, one who carries her charm and humour but not the emotional foundation that anchors her character. This comparison allows viewers to appreciate Marceline more deeply. Seeing her traits reflected in Marshall highlights the parts of her personality that define her role in Adventure Time. Her strength becomes more meaningful when compared to Marshall's stylized bravado. Her emotional openness becomes more profound when contrasted with Marshall's controlled performance of vulnerability. Her connections to others reveal their depth when placed beside Marshall's playful relationships. In this way, he serves as a tool for exploring the complexity of her character, The mirror also allows exploration of how different environments shape identity. Marceline grows within a world where emotions carry weight and relationships evolve through challenges. Her personality shifts through each era of her life, from childhood vulnerability to rebellious independence to emotional maturity. Marshall grows within a world shaped by imagination, where experiences do not have lasting consequences. His identity reflects the freedom of a universe that does not require suffering for growth. This contrast highlights how environment defines not only personality, but also the depth of emotional experience. Another important part of the mirror concept lies in how each character represents symbolism within their universe. Marceline symbolizes resilience, survival, and emotional truth. She carries the history of a world that changed violently, and she becomes a figure of continuity through centuries of shifting landscapes. Her music reflects this continuity, allowing her to express the emotional history she carries. Marshall symbolizes playful inversion. He takes elements of Marceline's identity and presents them through a lens designed to entertain rather than evoke deep emotional weight. His presence symbolizes the idea of storytelling itself, where memory, imagination, and artistic interpretation combine to form new versions of familiar figures. By comparing these two characters, one can explore how Adventure Time uses alternate versions to reflect emotional truths. Marceline represents the truth. Marshall represents the echo. Together, they form a mirror that shows how identity can change depending on who holds the pen. In Ooh, Marceline writes her own story through actions, choices, and experiences. In the Fionna and Cake universe, Marshall's story is written by someone else, shaped by admiration and creative reinterpretation. This mirror becomes meaningful because both characters reveal something about the world they inhabit. Marceline's story reflects the weight of history. Marshall's story reflects the joy of creative reinvention. One character asks viewers to understand emotional growth. The other asks them to enjoy the playful twist of alternate universe storytelling. Together, they create a balance between emotional depth and narrative fun. This introduction lays the foundation for a deeper exploration of Marceline and Marshall across the remaining chapters. It shows that their connection is not merely based on shared traits, but on the larger structure that allows their stories to coexist across universes. It shows that the mirror between them reveals the essence of how Adventure Time approaches identity, memory, and storytelling. It shows that the comparison offers insight not only into their characters, but also into the worlds that shaped them. In the chapters to come, this mirror will unfold through their origins, personalities, relationships, conflicts, and symbolic roles. Understanding the concept behind the mirror is the first step toward exploring how Marceline and Marshall reflect each other across the boundaries of two universes, each carrying meaning shaped by the nature of the world they inhabit. To understand the contrast between Marceline and Marshall, it is necessary to begin with the landscapes that shape them. Their personalities, emotional depth, and symbolic roles cannot be separated from the worlds they inhabit. Marceline's story unfolds within the true timeline of Adventure Time, where history carries weight and every moment arises from the consequences of the Mushroom War. Marshall's story unfolds in a fictional universe crafted within the Ice King's mind, where events are shaped by narrative purpose rather than lived experience. These worlds exist beside each other, yet they follow entirely different rules, and these rules guide the nature of both characters from the moment they first appear. Marceline's world begins long before the surface of Ooh takes its modern form. She grows up in the shadow of destruction, where fear, loss, and survival become central parts of her early life. The environment is unstable, filled with creatures and landscapes created by the war's long-reaching effects. Although centuries pass and Uu becomes a place filled with wonder and magic, the remnants of its violent origins remain part of Marceline's emotional history. Her earliest memories come from wandering through dangerous ruins, searching for safety, and navigating a landscape that constantly shifts between beauty and terror. This experience shapes her capacity to adapt, her emotional resilience, and her cautious approach to relationships. Marshall's world, by contrast, begins with imagination rather than history. The Fionna and Cake universe is not built from centuries of real events. It forms from the creative impulse of the Ice King, who constructs a world using fragments of memories and a desire to tell his own version of the stories that surround him. The environment lacks the deep scars of post-war reality. Instead, it presents a playful reflection of Uu, with environments that feel lighter, more stylized, and free from the heavy consequences that shape the true timeline. This world exists as a narrative space that feels familiar, yet it carries a tone shaped by fantasy rather than tragedy. This difference in origin affects everything about Marceline and Marshall. Marceline navigates a world where danger carries real impact. Her life is shaped by actual suffering, real companionship, deep connection, and traumatic loss. When she explores forests, caves, or abandoned cities, she does so with the memory of a child who once walked through ruins searching for safety. The landscapes around her hold meaning because they reflect centuries of survival. They shape her ability to read emotional tension, to protect herself, and to develop coping mechanisms forged through experience. Marshall does not carry this connection to his world. His forests, cities, and environments exist for narrative effect rather than emotional impact. The world mirrors Uu, yet it lacks the weight behind each location. The Fionna and Cake universe recreates the atmosphere of Adventure Time without carrying its consequences. This allows Marshall to move through the world with ease. He does not scan his surroundings for danger shaped by memory. He does not need to analyze emotional undercurrents. He exists in a space where experiences matter only in the context of storytelling. His environment shapes him into someone who performs confidence rather than someone who earned it through hardship. The contrast becomes clearer when looking at how society forms in each universe. Uu is chaotic, layered with kingdoms shaped by mutation, magic, and shifting alliances. These kingdoms evolve through conflict, diplomacy, loss, and renewal. Marceline grows within this living world. Her relationships with the Candy Kingdom, the Fire Kingdom, and other regions reflect centuries of connection and conflict. The places she visits are deeply tied to the emotional arcs of her life. Every region contains people she has known, loved, confronted, or lost. This creates a sense of continuity that follows her across time. The society in the Fionna and Cake universe lacks this depth of history. It mimics the structure of Uu, yet the relationships between locations exist because they serve narrative flow, not because they carry centuries of meaning. Marshall interacts with kingdoms and characters that represent playful inversions of those in Uu. These interactions do not arise from long-standing alliances or ancient conflicts. They arise because the world is designed to entertain and to reflect the Ice King's imaginative reinterpretations. Marshall's society shapes him into someone whose connections are surface level because the world does not support relationships that span hundreds of years. Marceline's world pushes her toward emotional growth. The combination of history, trauma, longevity, and interwoven relationships forces her to confront her feelings repeatedly. She cannot escape her past because it surrounds her in every part of Uu. Her memories emerge through locations, objects, and interactions with others who have lived through various stages of her life. The world encourages introspection by presenting constant reminders of who she once was. This reflective nature becomes a defining part of Marceline's identity. She grows because the world demands that she face her emotions. Marshall's world does not carry this emotional weight. His universe supports expressive confidence, bold personality, and playful behavior. Because the world lacks real trauma, Marshall emerges as a character who reflects style rather than introspection. His charm arises from the freedom to act without fear of consequence. He performs identity rather than discovering it through hardship. This does not make him shallow. It simply means he is shaped by a world built for excitement rather than healing. His personality reflects a fictional environment where emotional growth is optional, not necessary. Another part of the mirror lies in how the Ice King's imagination influences Marshall's world. The Fionna and Cake universe is shaped by his desires, memories, and insecurities. Because Marceline once played a profound role in Simon's life, she occupies a place deep within his subconscious. Even after the crown distorts his memory, he retains an emotional impression of her. This impression influences how he creates Marshall. The fictional world becomes a reflection of what Simon once felt, remembered, or admired, though he can no longer access these feelings directly. This means Marshall's world is anchored not in reality, but in emotional remnants filtered through a mind altered by powerful magic. Marceline's world contains the true version of these emotions. She lived through Simon's transformation. She carries the grief of watching him lose himself to the crown. Her world holds the truth behind their bond, while Marshall's world holds the distorted version created from fragments. This difference shapes how each character understands their environment. Marceline sees her world as a place of both pain and connection. Marshall sees his world as a playground of adventure, shaped by narrative logic. The rules of each universe also impact the nature of vampirism. Marceline's vampirism exists within a world where supernatural forces carry real consequences. Her transformation involves the Vampire King, centuries of hunting, and the development of abilities that shape her life. Her immortality forces her to confront emotional stagnation, loneliness, and the burden of timelessness. Marshall's vampirism exists in a world that treats these traits as aesthetic. His abilities are presented as part of a character concept rather than the result of ancient rituals or traumatic encounters. This difference influences how each character carries themselves in their environment. The landscapes also shape how each character approaches relationships. Marceline's world encourages deep bonds forged through shared history. Her connections to Princess Bubblegum, Finn, Jake, her mothers, and other characters arise from long-term interaction. These relationships evolve, break, heal, and shift across years. They are shaped by emotional complexity that reflects the world's depth. Marshall's world encourages stylized relationships built for narrative charm. His interactions with Fionna and other characters are entertaining, witty, and expressive, yet they lack the historical depth that defines Marceline's relationships. This difference highlights how environment shapes emotional expectations. The contrast between the two worlds also affects how each character confronts conflict. Marceline faces conflict shaped by survival, responsibility, and emotional injury. She encounters beings who carry trauma, kingdoms with political tension, and threats tied to ancient history. Her responses reflect experience and emotional weight. Marshall's conflicts exist within a storybook world designed for dramatic flair. His confrontations are stylized, humorous, and focused on entertainment. This affects how he presents himself. He does not need to carry emotional history into battle because the world does not revolve around past wounds. Even the atmosphere of each universe shapes identity. U contains quiet moments of isolation, vast landscapes filled with reminders of the past, an emotional weight built from centuries of change. The environment encourages reflection. Marshall's world contains an atmosphere of creative energy, with visuals and interactions designed to amuse and inspire. The environment encourages performance. Understanding these contrasts provides the foundation for exploring the mirror between Marceline and Marshall. The two characters reflect similar personalities on the surface, yet the worlds underneath them guide their emotional development in entirely different ways. Marceline carries truth shaped by history. Marshall carries style shaped by imagination. Marceline exists in a place where feelings carry consequences. Marshall exists in a place where feelings enhance narrative flair. Their worlds define them long before their actions do. This chapter establishes the terrain on which both characters stand, clarifying how the environments that shape them create the foundation for their identities. In the chapters that follow, the mirror between them becomes clearer as their origins, personalities, and relationships reveal how two similar characters can feel so different when shaped by worlds that follow different rules. To understand the mirror between Marceline and Marshall, their origins must be traced to the foundations of their universes. Origins define identity. They shape personality, emotional structure, and the way each character moves through life. Marceline emerges from a world built upon real destruction, real loss, and real transformation. Marshall emerges from a universe built from imagination, projection, and stylized reinterpretation. Their beginnings mark the most significant point of divergence between them, creating the first major crack in the mirror that reflects one character through the lens of the other. Marceline's origin lies deep within the aftermath of the Mushroom War. She is one of the few characters in Adventure Time whose earliest memories arise from a world still smouldering from that catastrophe. As a young child, she wanders through ruins and shattered landscapes, searching for safety and companionship. The world she grows up in is unrecognizable compared to the bright and colourful U that appears many centuries later. Her childhood unfolds in a place filled with danger, isolation, and disorientation. There is no structure to support her, no stable community to protect her, and no certainty in each step she takes. This instability forms the first layer of Marceline's identity, shaping her survival instincts and emotional guardedness. Her father, Hunson Abadia, belongs to an entirely different realm. His presence offers little stability in her early life. His nature, shaped by the rules of the Nightosphere, clashes with the emotional needs of a child living in a devastated world. The lack of grounded guidance leaves Marceline to navigate fear and loneliness without a stable parental figure. This absence becomes one of the central emotional wounds that follow her across centuries. It influences how she connects with others, how she protects herself from emotional harm, and how she handles the fear of abandonment. Her relationship with Simon Petrikov, long before he becomes the Ice King, provides her only consistent source of safety during these early years. His presence does not remove the dangers around her, but it provides a moment of stability that helps her survive the immediate threats of the post-war environment. Yet even this bond carries heavy emotional consequences. The transformation of Simon into the Ice King leaves Marceline with a loss that shapes much of her emotional journey. The man who protected her fades behind the influence of the crown, and the child who once depended on him must move forward alone. This profound rupture in her early life becomes one of the largest forces shaping her personality. As centuries pass, Marceline continues to navigate a world that evolves in unpredictable ways. Ooo grows colourful, magical, and surreal, filled with kingdoms that rise from the remnants of Earth's broken landscape. Marceline adapts to these changes. Her identity forms through experience, loss, companionship, and conflict. She learns that survival requires both emotional resilience and the ability to distance herself when necessary. These lessons build layers of complexity within her. She becomes a character defined by truth, shaped through centuries of real history. Her vampirism adds another dimension to her origin. She gains her powers through an encounter with the Vampire King, absorbing abilities and immortality that alter the trajectory of her life. This transformation does not occur because of narrative convenience. It occurs because of her place in the history of Ooo, where powerful forces interact with one another through long patterns of conflict. Her vampirism forces her into a strange relationship with time. She ages differently, experiences centuries without growing older, and carries memories that other beings cannot imagine. This makes her emotionally cautious, protective, and deeply aware of what it means to lose someone. Marshall's origin follows a completely different path. He does not emerge from the aftermath of a catastrophic war. He does not wander through ruins, searching for safety. He does not carry memories of lost parental figures or traumatic transformations. Instead, Marshall forms within a universe designed for narrative entertainment. The Fionna and Cake world exists because the Ice King imagines it. It comes from his fractured psyche, shaped by memories he cannot access directly and feelings he cannot express clearly. Marshall's origin, like all aspects of his universe, is built from reinterpretation rather than real experience. This means Marshall does not have a childhood shaped by survival. His origin is conceptual. He appears in the story as a fully formed character who fits the narrative role assigned to him. His personality is shaped by what the Ice King believes makes a compelling counterpart to Marceline. Because the crown distorts the Ice King's memory, Marshall becomes a stylized version rather than a direct parallel. He carries traits associated with vampires, musicians, tricksters, and charismatic figures. These traits appear because they contribute to the playful, dramatic energy of the fictional world. Marshall's origin does not carry emotional wounds tied to loss, fear, or centuries of loneliness. Instead, his identity is built from exaggerated features meant to mirror Marceline's most memorable traits. His confidence, humour, and sense of performance are shaped by the structure of the universe he inhabits. The Fionna and Cake world does not ask him to confront trauma. It does not force him to develop coping mechanisms. It provides a light-hearted environment that encourages expressive behaviour. His origin is artistic rather than emotional. The contrast becomes clearer when examining how each character arrives in their world. Marceline arrives in Ooo as a survivor. She finds her place through trial and error, conflict and friendship, and moments of profound vulnerability. She builds her identity through actions that carry real consequences. Every decision she makes throughout the centuries affects her relationships and her emotional development. Her growth is tied to time, memory, and personal evolution. Marshall arrives in his world as an idea. His universe is not built from centuries of history, but from the creative impulses of a single mind. His personality arises not from experiences, but from the narrative function he serves. He reflects traits associated with coolness, danger, confidence, and charm, because these traits help define his role within the story. He does not change because his world does not require change. His identity remains consistent because it is shaped by narrative repetition rather than emotional transformation. The comparison between their origins reveals how differently the two characters are designed. Marceline carries emotional depth shaped by real pain. Marshall carries stylized charm shaped by fiction. Marceline's origin explains her emotional complexity. She holds centuries of memories that influence her every action. She navigates relationships with caution because she has experienced abandonment and loss. She creates music as a way to express emotions that she struggles to articulate in conversation. She carries a mixture of anger and affection shaped by her long history. Marshall creates music because it contributes to the atmosphere of his world. His songs enhance his persona rather than expressing deep emotional conflict. His confidence comes from narrative design, not from surviving hardship. He interacts with others in ways that reflect his role as a charismatic figure rather than as someone who has navigated centuries of emotional complications. Another important aspect of their origins lies in their relationships with immortality. Marceline becomes immortal because of her encounter with the Vampire King. Her immortality forces her to confront the emotional consequences of watching loved ones age and die while she remains unchanged. This shapes her hesitance in forming long-term bonds, her cautiousness in revealing vulnerability, and her emotional distance in moments of conflict. Her immortality becomes both a strength and a burden, influencing her desire to protect others while guarding herself from emotional harm. Marshall's immortality does not carry the same emotional consequences. He exists in a universe where immortality is an aesthetic trait rather than a source of pain. Because his world does not contain the passage of centuries, he never faces the emotional challenges associated with outliving others. His identity remains tied to the coolness of the vampire archetype, not to the emotional weight carried by a being who has existed through multiple eras. His immortality remains stylish rather than heavy. Marceline's origin also shapes her relationship with loneliness. She experiences periods of isolation that span decades or centuries. These experiences leave lasting effects on her emotional structure. She becomes independent, yet her independence stems from necessity rather than preference. She learns to rely on herself because she has been left alone repeatedly throughout her life. This history shapes her sense of humour, her teasing behaviour, and her survival instincts. Marshall's world does not create this form of loneliness. He does not experience long spans of isolation. His relationships are designed to be immediate and entertaining. His independence arises from narrative design rather than emotional necessity. He performs independence in a way that reflects confidence and charm, not the emotional armour built through centuries of solitude. The difference in origins also affects how each character approaches love and connection. Marceline's relationships reflect her long journey toward emotional healing. She learns to open herself gradually, building trust slowly, and confronting her past with honesty. Her bond with Princess Bubblegum, for example, evolves through conflict, misunderstanding, reconciliation, and growth. This evolution reflects the emotional depth created by her origin. Marshall's relationships remain playful and surface level because the world does not allow for deep emotional arcs. His bond with Fionna reflects charm and inversion, not centuries of emotional layering. He exists as a character who enhances the storytelling dynamic of his universe, rather than as one who carries a heavy emotional past. Marceline's origin explains her vulnerability. She hides emotional wounds beneath humour, music, and mischief because she has experienced real pain. Marshall's origin explains his confidence. He embodies charisma because he is not shaped by those same emotional wounds. Understanding the origins of Marceline and Marshall reveals the foundation of their mirror relationship. One begins in a world defined by trauma and transformation. The other begins in a world defined by imagination and narrative style. One carries emotional depth shaped by survival. The other carries aesthetic depth shaped by creative reinterpretation. One evolves because the world requires growth. The other remains consistent because the world requires entertainment. Their origins create the structure upon which the rest of their identities are built. The mirror between them reflects similarities in surface traits while exposing the deep differences that lie beneath. The contrast between their beginnings explains why Marceline feels like a fully formed person shaped by centuries of life, while Marshall feels like a lively, expressive character shaped by storytelling tradition. Their origins set the tone for every part of the comparison that follows, making their relationship one of the most interesting reflections in Adventure Time. To understand Marceline and Marshall as reflections of each other, their vampirism must be examined within the context of their worlds. Vampirism shapes their abilities, their aesthetics, their identities, and the ways others perceive them. Yet the meaning of vampirism in Marceline's world differs entirely from the meaning of vampirism in Marshall's. In one universe, it carries weight tied to ancient history, personal sacrifice, and emotional burden. In the other, it serves as a narrative style meant to add flair, charm, and mystique. These differences reveal how two characters who appear similar on the surface can diverge profoundly in depth and purpose. Marceline's vampirism has roots in the ancient past of U. It does not exist as a simple character trait. It comes from a direct encounter with the Vampire King, a being whose presence shaped centuries of conflict between vampires and mortals. When Marceline absorbs the essence of the Vampire King, she gains powers that bring immortality but also shape her emotional future. This transformation alters the course of her existence, giving her abilities that set her apart from everyone else. The process ties her to a long history of battles, alliances, and shifting balances of power that stretch back to a time before U had settled into its modern form. Her vampirism grants her strength, flight, shape-shifting, and the ability to feed on the color red. In U, these abilities carry consequences. They connect her to the history of the Vampire King and his impact on the world. They place her in the center of conflicts she must eventually resolve, both internally and externally. This creates a complicated relationship with her own nature. Marceline must navigate what it means to be a vampire in a world that remembers the harm caused by vampires. Her identity becomes tied to the question of how much of the Vampire King's legacy she carries and how much she can define herself apart from it. Her powers also influence the way others see her. Vampirism makes her intimidating, mysterious, and unpredictable in the eyes of many characters. Yet Marceline learns to use her abilities in ways that reflect her emotional state rather than the expectations placed upon her. When she is confident, her powers appear effortless. When she is hurt or vulnerable, her transformations reveal her inner instability. This connection between emotion and ability shapes a complex relationship between her powers and her identity. Marshall's vampirism arises from an entirely different foundation. In the Fionna and Cake universe, vampirism exists as a stylized character element rather than a product of ancient history. Marshall's identity as a vampire does not stem from encounters with powerful beings, battles across eras, or traumatic transformations. Instead, his vampirism reflects the aesthetic conventions of the fictional universe. In this world, being a vampire enhances his charm, personality, and narrative presence. His abilities do not carry the emotional weight or historical significance of Marceline's. They exist because they suit his role as a cool, edgy counterpart to Marceline in the Ice King's imaginative world. Because the Fionna and Cake universe is built from storytelling impulses rather than real history, Marshall's vampirism remains untied to conflict. There is no vampire hierarchy that shaped his identity. There are no ancient battles that influence how others view him. His powers exist to elevate his persona, adding flair that aligns with the narrative tone of his universe. They allow him to float effortlessly, exude confidence, and display a level of control that enhances his cool demeanor. The contrast between Marceline's emotional relationship with her abilities and Marshall's carefree approach reveals the different meanings of vampirism across their worlds. Marceline experiences her powers as both a gift and a burden. She must grapple with the impact of centuries of history, the loss associated with immortality, and the responsibility that comes from holding the Vampire King's essence. Marshall does not experience these weighty implications. His abilities serve narrative style rather than emotional depth. They exist for entertainment, not for trauma or introspection. Marceline's vampirism also influences how she engages with identity. Because her transformation affects the course of her emotional development, she cannot separate her vampiric nature from her lived experiences. Her powers become tied to moments of growth, conflict, and healing. This connection creates a layered portrayal where vampirism reflects her internal state. At times, she embraces her strength. At others, her abilities feel heavy because they remind her of the distance between herself and others who live normal lifespans. Marshall's relationship with identity lacks this emotional layering. His vampirism enhances his persona without reshaping his emotional structure. His abilities help define his charm, his swagger, and his expressive confidence. They add to his theatrical presence, which suits a universe built from imaginative exaggeration. Because his world does not require emotional evolution, his vampirism remains consistent, contributing to a stable and stylish identity that does not shift over time. Another important difference lies in how vampirism influences relationships. Marceline often worries that her vampiric nature creates distance between herself and the people she loves. Her immortality and supernatural abilities can lead to misunderstandings, hesitations, or emotional barriers. These concerns appear in her interactions with friends, romantic partners, and family members. She must navigate the reality that her life extends far beyond that of most people she meets, creating a tension that surfaces in moments of vulnerability. Marshall's relationships do not carry this form of tension. His vampirism adds excitement to his presence rather than emotional conflict. Characters in his world respond to his powers as part of his charismatic identity rather than as a source of potential fear or misunderstanding. This reflects the difference between a world built from emotional truth and a world built from creative spontaneity. Marshall's vampirism remains an enhancement of his character rather than a source of internal struggle. Marceline's vampirism also defines her connection to time. Immortality forces her to witness centuries of change. She experiences long periods where she must adapt to new cultures, new environments, and new versions of the world. This passage of time creates emotional weight, shaping her maturity and her ability to understand long-term consequences. Her vampirism gives her the perspective of someone who has lived through eras of transformation. Marshall is not shaped by the passage of time in the same way. The Fionna and Cake universe does not move through centuries of change that affect its characters. Marshall remains anchored in a fictional present that does not demand adaptation or growth. His powers do not force him to confront the emotional consequences of immortality. Instead, they enhance his image within a stable world that does not evolve through real history. The symbolic meaning of vampirism in each universe reveals another layer of contrast. Marceline's vampirism symbolizes survival, resilience, and emotional truth. It reflects her journey through a world shaped by destruction and transformation. Her powers serve as reminders of the past and tools for navigating the future. Marshall's vampirism symbolizes style, confidence, and the joy of creative storytelling. His abilities reflect the playful nature of his universe and the imaginative reinterpretation that shapes every part of his existence. Both characters share traits associated with vampires, yet those traits serve entirely different narrative purposes. Marceline's fangs, wings, and transformations carry emotional and historical significance. Marshall's reflect aesthetic choices and narrative tradition. Marceline's immortality forces her to face emotional growth. Marshall's immortality enhances his persona without creating internal conflict. This difference influences how each character engages with vulnerability. Marceline must confront her past, her fears, and her emotional wounds. Her vampirism becomes intertwined with her sense of self. Marshall does not face the same internal challenges. His vampirism serves as a prop that reinforces his cool image. His vulnerabilities remain tied to personality rather than history. These contrasts show how the nature of vampirism in each universe defines the shape of each character. Marceline's powers reflect the deep, emotional, and historical complexity of her world. Marshall's powers reflect the playful, imaginative energy of the universe that created him. Their shared traits highlight surface-level similarities while revealing the profound differences in how identity forms across realities. As the mirror between the two characters continues to unfold, their vampirism becomes a key part of understanding how environment shapes identity. In the chapters to come, this comparison deepens through an examination of personality, humor, emotional depth, and the relationships that define each character within their worlds. Marceline and Marshall share surface traits that make them feel like clear reflections of each other. Both present themselves as confident, musically expressive, slightly mischievous, and comfortable, standing apart from those around them. Yet when viewed through the lens of their environments, the sources of these traits reveal entirely different origins. Their personalities grow from the worlds that formed them, and those worlds shape not only who they are, but how they express themselves. Through this comparison, the mirror between them becomes clearer. One character's personality develops through lived experience, emotional weight, and centuries of adaptation. The other develops through narrative intent, stylistic flair, and the imaginative patterns of a fictional universe. Marceline's personality begins with the instability of her early life. Surviving through a landscape marked by destruction forces her to grow cautious and self-reliant. These qualities become embedded in her emotional structure long before she gains the powers that make her immortal. Her guarded nature reflects the uncertainty of her childhood, where every day required vigilance. She learns early that trust cannot be given freely, that emotions must be protected, and that survival sometimes requires distance. This cautious foundation stays with her across centuries, shaping the way she interacts with new people. She may appear confident and playful on the surface, but beneath her humor lies a deep layer of vulnerability shaped by past loss. As she grows older, Marceline's personality expands through the relationships she forms. Each connection carries emotional weight linked to her long history. Her bond with Princess Bubblegum develops through conflict, trust, and reconciliation. Her relationship with Simon shapes her understanding of love and loss. Her interactions with Finn and Jake reveal both her playful side and her desire for companionship. These relationships influence her personality because they evolve across time. Marceline learns through mistakes, through moments of regret, through choices that reveal her flaws. This evolution gives her a sense of emotional realism that anchors her personality in truth. Marceline's humour arises from the same emotional foundation. She teases those she cares about, but her teasing often reflects a desire to test emotional safety. Humour becomes a tool to reveal vulnerability without exposing herself too quickly. This type of humour carries layers of meaning. It emerges from a complex emotional landscape shaped by centuries of loneliness and healing. She uses jokes, playful taunts, and mischief as shields that allow her to connect without risking immediate emotional exposure. Her personality therefore feels multifaceted, blending confidence with caution, independence with longing, and resilience with emotional fragility. Marshall's personality grows from an entirely different foundation. Because his universe exists as a story imagined within the Ice King's mind, Marshall's traits emerge not from emotional necessity, but from narrative design. He is crafted to be cool, charismatic, and effortlessly charming. His behavior reflects the aesthetic tone of a fictional universe that emphasizes style, rhythm, and dramatic energy. He appears playful because the world expects him to entertain. He appears confident because confidence serves as a defining trait of his archetype. His personality represents a distillation of the traits that make Marceline interesting, filtered through a lens that removes emotional burden. Marshall does not carry a history of survival. He does not develop caution or guardedness through hardship. His humour reflects confidence rather than vulnerability. He teases others because it enhances his persona, not because he needs humour to protect himself emotionally. His mischief is not a coping mechanism. It is a performance that fits the tone of his universe. These traits, while appealing, lack the emotional layers that shape Marceline's personality. They serve as surface expressions that make him immediately engaging, yet they do not require the depth of introspection found in Marceline. The fictional nature of Marshall's world defines how his personality functions. The Fionna and Cake universe does not challenge him in ways that force emotional growth. The conflicts he faces remain playful and stylized. They do not create wounds that shape long-lasting changes in his behavior. His confidence remains consistent because it is not tested by real hardship. His independence remains constant because it is not shaped by abandonment or loss. His cool demeanor remains stable because emotional stakes in his world are designed to be light. These characteristics suit a universe built for fun, but they reveal a fundamental contrast with Marceline. The contrast becomes more pronounced when examining the emotional range each character expresses. Marceline displays deep, layered emotions that arise from her long existence. She experiences loneliness that stretches across centuries. She struggles with regret tied to her interactions with those she cares about. She confronts sadness that reflects the weight of outliving many connections. Her anger stems from frustration, disappointment, or grief linked to real events. Her joy emerges from meaningful moments that hold significance in her life. This emotional spectrum gives her personality a sense of realism that makes her feel like a fully developed character. Marshall's emotional range remains narrower because his universe does not require the same level of depth. His sadness appears for narrative effect rather than as a reflection of history. His anger appears in playful exaggeration rather than emotional complexity. His charm appears as an inherent trait rather than something shaped by lived experience. His vulnerability rarely surfaces because the world does not contain emotional stakes that demand introspection. This creates a personality that is expressive and entertaining, but not deeply layered. Another important difference lies in how each character relates to others. Marceline often keeps people at a distance until she feels safe enough to open up. This behavior reflects her fear of abandonment and the pain of losing those she loves. Her relationships grow gradually, shaped by trust that forms over time. Even when she acts playful, her emotional depth surfaces through small gestures, moments of honesty, or expressions of grief that reveal her internal struggles. Marshall interacts with others from a position of assured confidence. He does not need to test emotional safety because his world does not threaten him with real emotional harm. He can be bold, charming, or mischievous without hesitation because the stakes of his relationships remain light. He does not fear abandonment because his universe does not revolve around emotional loss. His interactions remain focused on performance, rhythm, and personality rather than emotional connection. This difference reveals how environment determines the structure of relationships, which in turn shapes personality. Marceline's independence also reflects her history. Living through centuries without consistent companionship teaches her to rely on herself. Her independence arises as a response to fear and loss. It becomes a protective mechanism that shields her from vulnerability. Yet beneath this independence lies a desire for connection that she gradually acknowledges through her relationships. This gives her personality a sense of depth that emerges through internal conflict. Marshall's independence reflects the freedom of a character designed for narrative fun. He appears self-assured because confidence enhances his persona. He behaves independently because it complements his role within the fictional universe. His independence is not born from fear or pain. It arises from the stylistic expectations of his world. This difference demonstrates how personality can appear similar on the surface while diverging in meaning. Marceline's musical expression also reflects her emotional complexity. Her songs arise from personal experience. They express longing, regret, affection, or frustration. Her music becomes a direct extension of her inner world. She uses it to process emotions she cannot speak aloud. Her performances reveal vulnerability she hides in daily interactions. This creates a rich connection between her personality and her creative expression. Marshall's music serves different purposes. His songs enhance his charm and fit the tone of his universe. They reflect confidence, coolness, and style. They are not tied to centuries of emotional experience. Instead, they serve as narrative embellishments that reinforce his persona. His music reflects the energy of his fictional world, rather than deep personal history. This difference once again highlights how environment shapes identity. Marceline's personality evolves across time. She becomes more open, more emotionally honest, and more connected to those she loves. She learns to confront her fears, to reconcile her past, and to embrace stability after centuries of chaos. This evolution demonstrates the depth of her character. Marshall does not evolve in this way. His personality remains consistent because his universe does not demand emotional growth. His charm, confidence, and mischief remain stable across appearances. These contrasts reveal how personality arises from the nature of the world a character inhabits. Marceline's identity becomes complex because her world contains emotional truth. Marshall's identity becomes stylish and expressive because his world contains narrative flair. Their similarities exist because Marshall reflects a stylized version of Marceline's traits, but their differences exist because Marceline's traits arise from lived experience, while Marshall's arise from storytelling. This chapter shows how the environments that shape Marceline and Marshall define the structure of their personalities. As the mirror between them becomes clearer, the next chapter will explore how humour, mischief, and expressive play carry different meanings across their worlds. Humour shapes both Marceline and Marshall in memorable ways. It colours the way they interact with the people around them and gives each character a distinct presence that makes them stand out within their respective worlds. Yet the meaning behind their humour differs greatly. One uses teasing and mischief as a means of emotional protection, a shield forged from centuries of vulnerability. The other uses it as playful performance within a fictional space built for entertainment. By exploring the origins and functions of their humour, the mirror between them becomes clearer than ever. Surface similarities hide deeper differences defined by the emotional weight carried by one and the narrative function embodied by the other. Marceline's humour emerges early in her life, long before she gains her vampiric abilities. Her early years are filled with instability and fear, and humour becomes one of the few tools she can use to manage the emotional challenges she faces. As a child, navigating the ruins left by the Mushroom War, she learns to mask fear through playful behaviour. This tendency follows her into adulthood, shaping her interactions with others in ways that carry emotional undertones. Humour becomes a method for testing boundaries, lowering emotional risk, and exploring relationships without exposing herself too quickly. This early foundation creates a form of humour deeply intertwined with emotional caution. When Marceline teases someone, the action often serves as an emotional signal. It allows her to determine whether the other person can handle vulnerability, honesty, or affection. Her teasing is rarely cruel. Instead, it arises from a place of insecurity mixed with affection. She wants connection, but fears the consequences of emotional exposure. Humour offers a safe way to build relationships without surrendering control. It allows her to express interest, frustration, or concern in indirect ways. This makes her humour both meaningful and layered. The emotional complexity behind Marceline's humour becomes especially visible in her relationships with those closest to her. When she teases Princess Bubblegum, the teasing reflects their long history, filled with conflict and reconciliation. The humour carries hints of old wounds and renewed affection. It serves as a way for Marceline to reconnect while still protecting herself from vulnerability. When she jokes with Finn or Jake, the humour becomes lighter, reflecting her trust in them and her comfort within their presence. These interactions show that Marceline adjusts her humour based on emotional context, revealing that it is a tool shaped by lived experience rather than mere personality. Her mischief reflects similar emotional origins. Marceline has spent centuries living alone or in unpredictable environments. This isolation often leads her to test boundaries and challenge expectations as a way of asserting control over her world. She scares people for fun, not out of malice, but because it gives her a sense of agency in a life shaped by unpredictability. This mischief becomes part of her identity, but it also helps her manage emotions that might otherwise overwhelm her. Through playful disruption, she maintains a feeling of independence and emotional safety. Marshall's humour emerges from a completely different foundation. Because his universe exists within the fictional narratives created by the Ice King, Marshall's humour carries stylistic intent rather than emotional complexity. He is designed to be charismatic, bold, and effortlessly entertaining. His teasing serves as a narrative device that enhances his persona. It demonstrates confidence, charm, and dramatic flair. The humour suits the playful tone of the Fionna and Cake universe, where interactions are built for entertainment rather than emotional depth. Marshall uses humor to perform identity rather than to protect himself. His jokes often function as part of his character's swagger. He teases others to maintain an image of control and coolness that fits the expectations of his universe. Because he does not carry centuries of emotional wounds, his humor does not need to shield vulnerability. It becomes a form of expression that contributes to the atmosphere of the fictional world. His mischief exists to heighten the energy of scenes, not to navigate emotional tension. This distinction becomes clear when comparing the emotional reactions tied to their humor. When Marceline makes a joke, it often reveals something about her internal state. Even when she acts playful, her humor can reflect sadness, longing, or fear. Her teasing may hide affection. She is not ready to express openly. Her pranks may cover insecurity. Her sarcasm may protect her from emotional harm. Each instance of humor becomes a small window into her emotional complexity. When Marshall jokes, the humor does not reveal deeper internal conflict. It reveals confidence. It reinforces his persona. It fits the narrative, rhythm of a fictional world shaped by creativity rather than emotional truth. His jokes do not arise from past wounds. They arise from the structure of his universe. His mischief exists to keep the story lively and to highlight his energetic presence. The humor reflects narrative emphasis rather than character growth. Marceline's use of humor also reflects her relationship with power. As a vampire with immense abilities, she sometimes uses playful intimidation to test how others respond to her strength. Yet beneath this behavior lies an insecurity tied to her fear of scaring others away. Her strength has isolated her at times, leading her to use humor as a way of softening her presence. In contrast, Marshall uses his powers to enhance his cool image. His mischief adds flair to his confidence. This creates an entirely different dynamic, reinforcing the playful tone of his universe without revealing emotional uncertainty. Another difference lies in the longevity of their humor. Marceline's sense of mischief evolves across centuries. It grows as she matures emotionally. In her early adulthood, her humor is sharper and sometimes defensive. As she heals and reconnects with those she loves, her humor softens. It becomes more affectionate and less guarded. This evolution reflects genuine emotional growth, shaped by the events of her world. Marshall's humor remains consistent because he does not experience emotional evolution. His world does not stretch across centuries or require him to face life-altering events. His personality stays stable, reflecting the narrative structure of a universe where characters serve stylistic roles. His humor does not soften or deepen. It remains expressive and playful, suited to the energetic rhythm of the fictional world. Marceline's mischief also ties in to her creative expression. She uses humor not only in conversation, but also in her music. Her songs carry emotional tones that reflect her long life, revealing the vulnerability behind her playful exterior. Humor becomes a way to balance heavy emotions she cannot always express directly. Marshall's music does not carry this emotional layer. His performances serve his role as a charismatic figure in his universe. They highlight personality rather than internal struggle. These contrasts reveal how environment shapes the meaning of humor. Marceline lives in a world that forces her to confront pain and growth. Her humor becomes a survival tool, a way to navigate vulnerability, and a means of forming connections. Marshall lives in a world designed for entertainment. His humor becomes part of his performance, a way to build charm and energy that aligns with the tone of his universe. Understanding the role of humor deepens the mirror between them. Their playful behavior appears similar at first glance, yet the origins and functions differ completely. One reflects emotional survival. The other reflects narrative style. One hides wounds that have shaped centuries of life. The other highlights confidence crafted from imagination. These differences create a mirror that reveals the depth of Marceline's character and the stylistic creativity behind Marshall's. This chapter shows how humor and mischief define each character in ways that reflect their worlds. As the comparison continues, the next chapter will explore how music becomes one of the most significant points of contrast between them. Music shapes the identities of both Marceline and Marshall, forming one of the clearest parallels between them. They both sing, perform, and use music to command attention, yet the meaning behind their songs differs entirely. Music becomes a window into their emotional worlds, and through this window, the mirror between them becomes sharper. One uses music to express long-buried emotions shaped by history, loneliness, and healing. The other uses music to enhance presence, charm, and narrative impact. The contrast reveals how similar actions carry very different weight depending on the world that gives them shape. Marceline's relationship with music begins early in her life. It becomes one of the only consistent sources of comfort during the chaotic aftermath of the Mushroom War. She uses melody to soothe herself, to process emotions she cannot speak, and to hold on to memories that risk fading with time. Her earliest experiences are marked by loss and uncertainty, so music becomes a tool that helps her maintain emotional stability. The act of singing allows her to express fears and longing without needing an audience. It becomes a deeply personal form of communication that grows with her across centuries. As she develops into adulthood, music becomes intertwined with Marceline's identity. She does not perform to impress. She performs to reveal truth. Her songs emerge from emotional pain, joy, regret, or affection. Each performance reflects a piece of her inner world. Because Marceline lives through centuries of change, her emotions accumulate layers that she cannot easily reveal through conversation. Music becomes a safer, more honest form of expression. It allows her to confess vulnerability and confront memories she has carried for ages. This emotional depth turns her music into something intimate. When Marceline sings, she opens parts of herself that she often hides behind humor or mischief. Her melodies carry fragments of sorrow tied to abandonment, loneliness tied to immortality, and affection tied to bonds that have survived time. Her music becomes a testament to lived experience, reflecting the emotional weight of her long life. The world of Oo hears these truths through her songs, and her audience, whether large or small, senses that her music expresses genuine feeling rather than performance. Music also becomes a tool for connection. Marceline uses songs to rebuild relationships, especially those strained by conflict or misunderstanding. This is particularly visible in her connection with Princess Bubblegum. Music allows Marceline to express emotions she struggles to communicate directly. It provides a path to reconciliation, reflection, and honesty. Because their relationship spans centuries of conflict and affection, music helps bridge emotional gaps that words cannot easily fill. This shows how music serves as both an emotional outlet and a means of forming deeper bonds. Marshall's relationship with music reflects the opposite dynamic. Because he exists in a fictional universe designed for storytelling, his songs serve narrative energy rather than emotional confession. His performances highlight personality traits instead of revealing personal history. The Fionna and Cake universe favors dramatic flair, playful exaggeration, and clever inversion of familiar elements. Marshall's music fits this tone, enhancing his presence as a charismatic character. His performances become part of his aesthetic rather than an expression of emotional depth. Marshall sings to entertain. His music highlights his confidence, his mischievous nature, and his playful persona. These qualities suit the expectations of a world built to reimagine familiar characters with a twist. His singing carries charm, rhythm, and theatricality. It reflects the stylized tone of his universe rather than the emotional history of a long life. When Marshall performs, he shapes mood and energy within a fictional story, not personal. Truth drawn from centuries of experience. The contrast between real emotional history and narrative design becomes especially clear when comparing their motivations. Marceline performs because she must express emotions she cannot carry alone. Music allows her to release feelings that accumulate through her long life. Marshall performs because his story expects him to be captivating. His music enhances scenes, contributes to pacing, and reflects the creativity of the universe that shapes him. This difference reveals how two characters can share the act of singing, yet experience entirely different relationships with the songs they create. Marceline's music also reflects emotional transformation. Her earlier songs contain sharper tones, confronting pain and conflict directly. As she matures emotionally, her music grows gentler, expressing healing and acceptance. This evolution mirrors her growth as a character. Her songs often mark significant turning points in her relationships and internal struggles. They become part of her emotional journey, documenting the layers of her identity. Marshall's music does not follow an emotional progression. His persona remains consistent across appearances. His songs reinforce the identity he carries from the moment he enters the story. Because his universe does not push him to evolve, his music remains a stylistic extension of his established character. The consistency suits the fictional world, but it also highlights the difference between emotional expression and narrative flair. Another key difference lies in vulnerability. Marceline uses music to expose her inner self. When she sings, she becomes open in ways that contrast with her guarded behavior. Her music reveals sadness she conceals behind strength or mischief. It shows longing she cannot articulate directly. It allows her to express affection she fears revealing. This vulnerability makes her music powerful, adding depth to her character and giving emotional weight to her performances. Marshall rarely reveals vulnerability through music. His songs maintain a confident tone that aligns with the style of his world. He does not use music to process grief or confront emotional wounds, because his universe does not present him with these challenges. His performances remain controlled, expressive, and entertaining, yet they do not expose internal conflict. This reflects the nature of a world where emotional resonance is less important than creative energy. The worlds themselves shape how music functions. Ooh contains emotional echoes tied to magic, memory, and centuries of transformation. Marceline's music resonates with these echoes. It becomes part of the cultural and emotional landscape of the world. Characters remember her songs, connect her music to shared experiences, and understand her through the emotional truth she expresses. The Fionna and Cake universe does not carry centuries of emotional history. Songs exist as narrative tools that enhance the fictional energy of the world. Marshall's music fits this pattern. His songs contribute to atmosphere, but do not reshape the emotional structure of the universe. They remain tied to entertainment rather than emotional influence. These contrasts reveal how two characters can appear similar in practice, yet differ dramatically in meaning. Marceline's music expresses emotional survival. Marshall's music expresses narrative style. Marceline sings because she must. Marshall sings because the story needs him too. Marceline's music evolves as she grows. Marshall's music maintains a consistent tone. Marceline's vulnerability surfaces through melody. Marshall's confidence is reinforced through performance. This difference deepens the mirror between them. On the surface, they stand side by side, each holding a guitar and expressing themselves through song. Underneath, one carries centuries of emotion. The other carries the playful energy of a fictional universe. Their music reveals the core difference between real emotional depth and narrative reinterpretation. This chapter highlights how their worlds shape their artistic expression. In the chapters to come, their relationships, conflicts, and internal struggles will further reveal how two similar characters become so different when shaped by truth in one world and imagination in another. The relationships surrounding Marceline and Marshall reveal some of the clearest differences between them. Though they appear similar in personality and style, the bonds they form follow entirely different paths. Marceline's relationships are shaped by real history, emotional depth, and long-term evolution. Marshall's relationships are shaped by narrative function, playful energy, and the imaginative structure of a fictional universe. By understanding how each character connects to the people around them, the mirror between them becomes sharper. One lives within a world where relationships carry weight, scars, and growth. The other lives within a world where relationships exist as creative reinterpretations built to entertain. Marceline's relationships begin in childhood. Her earliest and most impactful bond is with Simon Petrikov, long before he becomes the Ice King. Simon's presence during her vulnerable years creates a deep emotional foundation that follows her for centuries. He becomes the first stable figure she encounters in a world filled with unpredictability. Marceline's attachment to him shapes her understanding of trust, protection, and the fragility of companionship. When Simon loses himself to the crown, Marceline experiences one of the most painful ruptures of her life. This loss influences how she approaches relationships in the future, creating a guardedness tied to the fear of losing others again. Her relationship with her father, Hunson Abadir, adds another layer of complexity. Hunson belongs to the Nightosphere and acts according to rules that do not align with her emotional needs. His unpredictable behavior and lack of understanding create tension and confusion during her formative years. As she grows older, Marceline learns to navigate this relationship with caution. She understands that Hunson loves her in his own way, but his nature makes emotional closeness difficult. This dynamic shapes Marceline's wariness in forming new bonds. She learned early that love does not guarantee emotional safety. As centuries pass, Marceline builds relationships that reflect the evolution of her personality. Her bond with Princess Bubblegum becomes one of the most significant in her life. Their connection develops through conflict, distance, affection, and reconciliation. They share a long history filled with disagreements, misunderstandings, and moments of closeness. This relationship forces Marceline to confront her own emotional patterns. She learns to express vulnerability, to communicate honestly, and to trust someone deeply. The depth of this bond reveals the emotional maturity she gains across centuries. Their connection represents growth, healing, and companionship built through genuine experience. Marceline's friendships with Finn and Jake reveal another side of her identity. She interacts with them through playful teasing, yet the trust between them grows steadily. Finn sees her not as an intimidating vampire, but as a trusted friend. Jake treats her with relaxed familiarity, accepting her presence without judgment. Marceline values these connections because they offer companionship without the heavy emotional history that defines many of her other relationships. These friendships give her a space where she can express lighter sides of her personality without fear of emotional risk. Her relationships with her mothers expand her understanding of love and belonging. Her connection with Elise reveals the pain of loss and the importance of memory. Her bond with her demon mother introduces aspects of identity that reflect strength and tolerance for difference. These relationships add to the layers of her emotional world. They influence her self-perception and contribute to her understanding of family. Because Marceline lives for centuries, these bonds shape her across long arcs of time. They become part of her emotional DNA. Marshall's relationships follow a very different structure. Because he exists in the Fionna and Cake universe, his bonds do not stretch across centuries. They exist within a narrative created for entertainment. His relationships are influenced by the Ice King's imagination, meaning they reflect stylized versions of connection rather than deep emotional ties. Marshall's behavior appears confident and expressive, but the universe does not force him to confront emotional wounds or long-term consequences. His relationships are playful, bold, and theatrical, because the world around him supports those traits. Marshall's bond with Fionna is characterized by light-hearted energy. They interact through teasing, charismatic exchanges, and dramatic flair. Their relationship reflects the tone of a universe built for adventurous storytelling. There is affection, yet it does not carry the emotional complexity found in Marceline's bonds. Their interactions highlight contrast and playful rivalry, not the slow, painful, healing-driven arcs found in Marceline's relationships. Marshall and Fionna do not share a long history shaped by loss or reconciliation. Their connection feels immediate because it is designed to exist as part of a story rather than part of an emotional timeline. The fictional universe also shapes Marshall's relationships with other characters. Bonds in this world are shallow by design, created for narrative efficiency rather than emotional realism. Characters appear as variations of familiar figures, each crafted to serve a specific role within the story. This structure creates relationships that function more as creative inversions than as emotional journeys. Marshall's confidence, charm, and teasing fit these dynamics perfectly. They allow him to stand out in scenes without requiring emotional growth or long-term transformation. Marshall does not experience the fear of losing loved ones. He does not grapple with abandonment or the burden of immortality. His universe shields him from emotional stakes, allowing his relationships to remain stable in tone. His interactions center on energy rather than vulnerability. This contrast creates a fundamental difference in how their worlds shape relational bonds. Marceline's relationships influence her emotional evolution. She learns through conflict, she grows through reconciliation. She carries scars that surface in moments of tension, shaping her behavior and her emotional expectations. Marshall's relationships influence his persona, not his internal state. They reinforce his cool image rather than challenge him to confront emotional truths. Another part of the contrast lies in how others perceive them. Marceline often intimidates people due to her powers and emotional complexity. She earns trust slowly because her personality reflects the weight of her past. When she connects with someone, the connection becomes significant. Marshall, however, commands attention immediately. His charm is recognized without hesitation. His world encourages quick relationships rather than slow emotional development. This difference highlights how each world defines connection. Marceline's relationships can break, heal, and deepen. She experiences long periods of separation, misunderstanding, or conflict that eventually resolve through growth. These arcs reflect the emotional realism of Wu. Marshall's relationships remain consistent because his world avoids long arcs of conflict and reconciliation. His relationships stay within the bounds of entertainment, not emotional transformation. Understanding these differences reveals why Marceline feels like a character shaped by truth, while Marshall feels like a character shaped by style. Marceline's relationships define her emotional journey. Marshall's relationships define his narrative role. Marceline becomes more open, honest, and emotionally grounded over time. Marshall remains confident, playful, and expressive without needing to change. This chapter shows how relational bonds shape identity in profoundly different ways, depending on the world a character inhabits. In the next chapter, the mirror between them deepens as we explore the nature of their internal conflicts. The internal lives of Marceline and Marshall form one of the sharpest contrasts between them. Their external similarities often lead viewers to view them as parallels, yet beneath the surface, their emotional landscapes could not be more different. Marceline carries layers of conflict shaped by a long life filled with change, loss, and healing. Marshall carries confidence shaped by narrative design rather than emotional struggle. Exploring their internal worlds reveals how each character expresses vulnerability, handles conflict, and processes emotions according to the rules of their universe. Marceline's internal conflict begins in childhood. The instability of the post-war world forces her to confront fear and loneliness from an early age. Her memories from this period shape her emotional foundation. The absence of consistent care creates a deep sense of insecurity that follows her into adulthood. She learns to rely on herself because relying on others has led to pain. This survival instinct becomes woven into her personality, making vulnerability both necessary and frightening. The transformation of Simon into the Ice King becomes one of the most formative emotional wounds in Marceline's life. Simon provides stability and care during her most vulnerable years. When the crown slowly steals his identity, Marceline experiences the loss of her protector in the most painful way imaginable. She watches someone she loves fade into a distant version of himself, unable to recognize her or provide comfort. This memory becomes a central point of internal conflict. It creates a fear of abandonment that persists long after Simon disappears from her daily life. Because immortality prevents her from aging alongside the people she loves, Marceline's internal conflict deepens with time. She watches others grow older, change, or move on while she remains physically the same. This forces her to confront a sense of emotional stagnation. At times, she struggles with feeling disconnected from the world around her. Her internal life becomes a mixture of longing for connection and fear of losing it. This duality shapes the contradictions in her personality. She pushes people away when she fears pain, yet she reaches for companionship when loneliness becomes overwhelming. Her relationship with her father creates additional internal tension. Hudson Abadir's nature makes emotional closeness difficult. His behavior often reflects the rules of the nightosphere rather than the emotional needs of a child. Marceline's attempts to understand him create a conflict between love and frustration. She wants acceptance, yet she struggles to reconcile his identity with her own needs. This tension becomes an ongoing part of her internal journey, influencing her patience, resilience, and ability to forgive. Marceline's internal struggles also shape her relationship with Princess Bubblegum. Their long history contains moments of miscommunication, emotional distance, and unresolved tension. Marceline sometimes finds it difficult to express her feelings directly, leading to conflicts that reflect her fear of vulnerability. When disagreements arise, Her instinct to retreat reveals an internal battle between emotional self-protection and the desire for closeness. Their eventual reconciliation represents a significant moment in Marceline's emotional development, showing her willingness to confront vulnerability and embrace healing. Marceline's immortality adds another layer to her internal conflict. Immortality gives her power, yet creates isolation. She often feels out of place in a world that continues to change without her. She carries memories that others cannot understand. This creates a sense of emotional distance that shapes her actions and reactions. Her internal world becomes a landscape filled with memories, regrets, and moments of joy that stretch across centuries. These experiences make her complex, nuanced, and deeply human, despite her supernatural nature. Marshall's internal world follows a very different structure. Because he exists in a universe created from imagination rather than history, he does not carry the burden of past trauma. His internal life reflects confidence rather than conflict. His personality is built around charm, flair, and playful mischief. These traits arise not from emotional necessity, but from narrative design. Marshall does not need to protect himself from vulnerability because his world does not place him in situations that challenge emotional safety. His universe avoids deep emotional stakes, allowing him to remain self-assured without confronting painful experiences. This does not mean Marshall has no emotional moments. He shows glimpses of feeling, but these moments remain tied to the tone of his world. His vulnerability appears as a stylistic element rather than an expression of internal conflict. He might express annoyance, amusement, or brief frustration, yet these emotions do not carry long-term consequences. They do not shape his identity or force him to confront personal wounds. His emotional range remains consistent because his world does not evolve in ways that require introspection. The Fionna and Cake universe exists as a space where emotional complexity is limited by narrative purpose. Marshall reflects the Ice King's imagined reinterpretation of Marceline. Because the Ice King's memories of Marceline are fragmented and influenced by the crown, Marshall becomes a stylized reflection rather than an emotionally layered character. This means Marshall carries a version of Marceline's charm and musical talent without the emotional scars that shape her personality. His internal life remains aligned with narrative entertainment rather than emotional depth. Marshall's confidence arises from this structure. He does not face situations that challenge his self-perception. He does not confront centuries of loneliness or fear. He does not lose people he loves in ways that reshape his emotional world. His universe shields him from the emotional complexity found in Marceline's. This allows him to behave with carefree swagger, unencumbered by internal tension. His personality remains consistent because the story that shapes him remains consistent. Another part of their contrast lies in how each character expresses vulnerability. Marceline's vulnerability surfaces in moments of genuine emotional expression. She reveals her inner world through music, through fleeting moments of honesty, or through the struggle to reconnect with people she cares about. Her vulnerability feels raw because it reflects real emotional pain. When she lowers her emotional walls, the moment carries significance. It marks personal growth and the willingness to face emotional risk. Marshall expresses vulnerability in a stylized manner. His vulnerability does not emerge from internal conflict. It emerges from narrative rhythm. When he acts, frustrated or introspective, the moment reflects playful tension rather than deep emotional wounds. His vulnerability functions as a character detail rather than a turning point. It does not lead to emotional transformation. This reflects the fictional nature of his universe, where characters exist to entertain rather than evolve. Marceline's internal conflict also shapes her relationship with power. Her abilities grant her strength, but also intensify her emotional struggles. She worries about the impact of her powers on those she loves. She fears becoming a threat or repeating the mistakes of her father. This creates internal tension between her identity as a powerful being and her desire to be understood. Marshall's powers do not create this tension. They enhance his cool persona without creating emotional conflict. His abilities remain stylistic rather than symbolic. Marceline's internal conflict pushes her toward emotional growth. Over time, she learns to acknowledge her fears, confront her past, and reconnect with those she once pushed away. Her internal evolution becomes one of the defining aspects of her character. Marshall's internal world remains stable. He does not need to grow because the universe does not present him with experiences that require change. His confidence remains unchallenged. His charm remains steady. His vulnerability remains controlled. These differences highlight why Marceline feels grounded in emotional truth, while Marshall feels grounded in narrative performance. Marceline's internal world reveals the weight of her history. Marshall's reveals the freedom of fiction. Marceline expresses pain shaped by centuries of life. Marshall expresses style shaped by narrative design. Marceline grows through conflict. Marshall maintains his persona because his world does not push him to evolve. Understanding their internal worlds shows how environment shapes identity at the deepest levels. Marceline becomes complex because her world contains emotional reality. Marshall becomes expressive because his world contains narrative imagination. This contrast strengthens the mirror between them, revealing how two similar figures reflect entirely different forms of truth. This chapter sets the stage for the next comparison, where their identities are explored through the lens of narrative reinterpretation and imaginative reflection. The connection between Marceline and Marshall becomes clearest when viewed through the lens of narrative reflection. One character exists as an individual, shaped by centuries of real experience within the true world of Ooo. The other exists as a reimagined version shaped by storytelling impulse, memory distortion, and the imaginative instincts of a mind altered by powerful magic. By examining how identity forms through storytelling, this chapter reveals why Marshall feels both familiar and fundamentally different from Marceline. He mirrors her, yet the mirror is warped by the inner landscape of the Ice King, creating a character whose essence reflects interpretation rather than truth. Marceline begins as a real person within the internal logic of Adventure Time. Her story unfolds through events that shape her across time. She experiences loss, companionship, fear, resilience, and emotional healing. Her identity forms through a combination of history, personality, and choices made throughout her long life. Everything about Marceline is grounded in the world she inhabits. Her strengths, weaknesses, relationships, and emotional responses all arise from the genuine experiences she has lived. This makes her a fully realized character with a sense of authenticity that resonates through every appearance. Marshall's identity does not develop in this organic way. He does not grow from lived experience, nor does he inhabit a world filled with emotional consequences. Instead, his identity forms from the Ice King's imagination. The Fionna and Cake universe exists as a creative reinterpretation of the world around him. Characters become reflections shaped by the memories, perceptions, and subconscious impulses of a person whose mind is deeply fractured by the crown. This means Marshall's identity is not built from his own history. It is built from the Ice King's interpretation of Marceline. This reinterpretation influences every aspect of Marshall's character. The Ice King admires Marceline, even if he cannot fully remember their shared past. He retains emotional impressions buried beneath the magical distortion. These impressions blend affection, confusion, admiration, and longing. Because he cannot access these feelings consciously, they surface indirectly through the characters he creates. Marshall becomes one of the clearest expressions of this influence. His confidence reflects the Ice King's memory of Marceline's independence. His charm reflects her charisma. His musical presence reflects her creative spirit. Yet all of these traits appear exaggerated because they pass through the filter of imagination rather than truth. This creates a version of Marceline's identity reshaped for narrative effect. Marshall becomes a stylized reflection, a character designed to stand out within a fictional universe that prioritizes entertainment. His traits appear sharper, more theatrical, and less emotionally grounded. His mischief becomes playful rather than defensive. His cool demeanor becomes effortless rather than shaped by survival. His confidence becomes consistent rather than challenged by emotional wounds. This transformation reveals how storytelling changes identity, turning lived experience into narrative archetype. Marceline, by contrast, cannot be reduced to such simplicity. Her identity contains contradictions that reflect the complexity of real emotion. She can be both strong and vulnerable. She can be both affectionate and defensive. She can be playful yet deeply introspective. These contradictions arise because Marceline is shaped by truth. Her story is not curated by a single mind. It emerges from interactions with the world and the people around her. This gives her identity weight and nuance that Marshall cannot replicate. Because Marshall exists in a fictional universe created by another character, his identity is influenced by what that character finds appealing. The Ice King often creates stories that revolve around dramatic tension, exaggerated conflict, and stylized relationships. This storytelling instinct affects Marshall's persona. He becomes dramatic, confident, and expressive because those qualities suit the narrative the Ice King wants to tell. Marshall becomes a character who represents the idea of Marceline filtered through the Ice King's imagination. He embodies fantasy, not memory. He reflects artistic exaggeration, not emotional truth. This difference becomes particularly striking when considering how each character relates to narrative purpose. Marceline's purpose within the main timeline grows organically. She becomes a figure of resilience, emotional honesty, and personal growth. She contributes to the history of Ooo through her actions and emotional journey. She changes as the story progresses because her development is tied to the evolving world around her. Her identity remains grounded in the truth of her experiences. Marshall's purpose remains tied to the function he serves within the fictional universe. His presence exists to create energy, humor, and charm. He is designed to be compelling in a way that fits the tone of his world. His identity serves narrative pacing rather than emotional evolution. Because he does not inhabit a world shaped by real history, his personality remains consistent. This stability reflects the narrative structure of his universe, which prioritizes entertainment over emotional depth. Another part of this contrast lies in how each character represents memory. Marceline embodies memory in a literal sense. She carries centuries of experiences within her. These memories shape her emotional reactions, her relationships, and her identity. Her past is not something she can escape or reinterpret easily. It surrounds her, influences her actions, and becomes part of the emotional texture of her story. Marshall embodies memory in a symbolic sense. His identity reflects the Ice King's fragmented memories. He becomes a distorted echo of Marceline as she exists within Simon's lost recollections. The Crown's influence transforms these memories into creative reinterpretations. Marshall becomes the memory of Marceline rewritten through fantasy. He embodies the idea of her rather than the truth of her. This makes him compelling, yet fundamentally different in emotional grounding. The mirror between them reveals how memory and imagination shape identity in different ways. One carries truth, the other carries interpretation. One reflects emotional reality. The other reflects narrative desire. One emerges from a world with history. The other emerges from a world with style. Understanding this dynamic allows deeper insight into the emotional meaning behind their mirror relationship. Marceline shows who she truly is. Marshall shows how someone else perceives her through layers of distortion. This makes Marshall valuable not as a duplicate of Marceline, but as an illustration of how identity transforms when shaped by a mind trying to recreate someone they once knew. Through him, the audience sees traces of what the Ice King remembers, admires, or tries to express about Marceline without fully understanding why. This bizarre yet poignant connection highlights the deeper tragedy behind the Ice King's distorted memory. Marshall becomes a reminder that the Ice King once knew Marceline well enough for her essence to echo through his imagination. Yet the echo emerges through fiction rather than memory. The result is a character who stands close to Marceline in appearance and behavior, yet remains separated by the emotional truth he cannot access. The reflection, therefore, reveals both characters more clearly. Marceline's depth becomes more evident when compared to Marshall's stylized charm. Marshall's appeal becomes more understandable when viewed as a filtered reinterpretation of traits that truly belong to Marceline. The mirror becomes a way to understand how the story treats identity across worlds. It shows how truth transforms through imagination, and how characters can be connected even when separated by layers of narrative distortion. This chapter deepens the understanding of how their identities form through different forces. In the next chapter, the focus shifts to how each character expresses masculine and feminine energy within their respective worlds, revealing another layer of their mirrored design. When comparing Marceline and Marshall, one of the most interesting layers of contrast can be found in the way each character expresses energy traditionally read as masculine or feminine. These energies do not define gender, nor do they imply rigid roles. Instead, they describe how each character carries themselves, how they express emotion, and how they interact with the world around them. Because Marceline and Marshall are reflections of one another across universes, their energy carries both similarities and striking differences. These differences reveal how personality, world structure, and narrative purpose shape the way each character presents their identity. Marceline's energy blends independence, vulnerability, confidence, and emotional honesty in a way that feels deeply grounded in her long life. She expresses a form of strength shaped by survival rather than performance. Her confidence arises from experience, not theatrics. She carries emotional depth that reflects centuries of growth, allowing her to navigate the world with a sense of quiet resilience. Her presence contains a mixture of gentleness and intensity. She can be emotionally open when she chooses to be, yet she also protects herself from harm with a strength born from hardship. This combination of qualities creates a complex balance. Marceline expresses assertive energy through her independence, her confrontations, and her willingness to stand up for those she cares about. She also expresses nurturing energy through her protective instincts and the emotional care she gives to others in subtle ways. This mixture does not arise from narrative design. It emerges naturally from the life she has lived. Marceline's interactions with others highlight this blend of energies. When she connects with Princess Bubblegum, the relationship shifts between gentle vulnerability and assertive intensity. Marceline reveals affection through emotional honesty and through acts of protection. She expresses frustration through straightforwardness, yet she also shows patience and care. These interactions reflect a balanced internal world shaped by long experience. Her energy feels grounded, lived in, and authentic. Her relationships with Finn and Jake also reflect this dynamic. Marceline often appears relaxed and confident around them, allowing her playful side to emerge. She teases them with the lightness of an older friend who has seen far more than they can imagine. Yet beneath this playful behavior lies a sense of emotional awareness. She reads their feelings easily, responds with understanding when needed, and reveals vulnerability when she feels safe. This creates a complex energy that shifts naturally depending on context. Marshall's energy follows a different pattern, shaped entirely by the nature of the fictional universe he inhabits. Because he exists as a creative reinterpretation within the Ice King's mind, his energy appears more stylized, expressive, and theatrical. He embodies the confidence and swagger associated with dramatic masculine archetypes. Yet this energy remains performative rather than grounded in emotional truth. His actions, posture, and presence are designed to enhance the tone of his universe rather than reflect internal conflict. Marshall carries expressive confidence that fits within the playful atmosphere of the Fionna and Cake world. His swagger, charm, and boldness highlight a form of energy that feels larger than life. He moves with dramatic assurance, interacts with others through exaggerated expressions, and reveals personality traits that feel enhanced for narrative effect. This energy suits a world built for entertainment, where characters serve stylistic roles rather than express emotional realism. At the same time, Marshall carries softer qualities that mirror elements of Marceline's energy, though these qualities appear as stylized traits rather than lived ones. He conveys smooth charm, occasional sensitivity, and a relaxed physical presence. These elements reflect the reinterpretation of Marceline's gentle side through a masculine lens shaped by narrative flair. Yet because Marshall does not possess the emotional history that shapes Marceline, these softer qualities feel consistent rather than conflicted. They remain part of his established persona rather than shifting in response to internal struggle. The contrast between emotional grounding and narrative performance becomes more visible when examining how each character expresses confidence. Marceline's confidence grows from survival and self-understanding. She has faced danger, loneliness, and emotional wounds. Each experience shapes a stronger sense of identity. Her confidence carries emotional texture. It can falter when she feels vulnerable. It can sharpen when she feels threatened. It can soften when she feels safe. This dynamic energy reflects authentic emotional experience. Marshall's confidence remains consistent because it reflects narrative expectation rather than emotional evolution. His universe does not place him in situations that challenge his identity. His confidence appears stable because stability serves the tone of the world he inhabits. It enhances his charm and contributes to the playful rhythm of the narrative. This creates a form of energy that is smooth, expressive, and constant. Another contrast lies in how each character expresses aggression or assertiveness. Marceline shows assertiveness when she feels her boundaries are crossed, when she defends others, or when she confronts emotional conflict. Her assertiveness often reflects genuine frustration or lingering emotional wounds. It arises from internal tension rather than external performance. Her actions hold meaning because they connect to her emotional journey. Marshall's assertiveness appears as part of his charismatic persona. He behaves boldly because boldness suits the narrative energy of the fictional universe. His assertive moments focus on dramatic impact rather than emotional truth. They enhance his cool persona without reflecting internal conflict. This distinction reveals how masculine energy in Marshall's world functions as style, not emotional response. Marceline's feminine energy appears through emotional depth, introspection, and the ability to nurture connections. She expresses vulnerability in subtle ways, often through music or quiet moments. She processes emotions slowly and carefully. Her interactions with others reveal empathy that comes from experience, not narrative design. This creates a complex balance where strength and vulnerability coexist naturally. Marshall's softer energy appears as mood rather than depth. He reveals smaller moments of sensitivity, yet these moments serve stylistic purpose rather than emotional necessity. His softness does not reflect internal wounds, fear, or longing. It reflects narrative charm, enhancing scenes without carrying lasting consequences. This shows how feminine energy in the Fionna and Cake universe becomes an aesthetic choice rather than a form of emotional growth. These differences reveal how each character expresses balance. Marceline's energy is dynamic, shifting between gentle and assertive qualities depending on emotional context. Marshall's energy remains consistent, blending boldness and charm in a way that suits his world. This contrast shows how one character expresses masculine and feminine elements through lived complexity, while the other expresses them through narrative style. The mirror between them reflects this contrast clearly. Marceline represents an authentic integration of multiple forms of energy shaped by life experience. Marshall represents a stylized reinterpretation that blends those energies into a consistent persona. Marceline expresses depth, Marshall expresses flair. Marceline's balance emerges from real emotional growth. Marshall's balance emerges from artistic design. Understanding these differences provides another layer to their mirrored identity. It reveals how each character expresses aspects of Marceline's true nature through different lenses. The next chapter explores their symbolic roles, deepening the contrast between truth and reinterpretation within their worlds. Marceline and Marshall serve symbolic roles within their respective universes, and these roles underscore the contrast between lived experience and narrative reinterpretation. Symbolism often emerges from the way a character interacts with their world, the emotional themes they represent, and the purpose they fulfill within the larger story. Even though Marceline and Marshall share similar appearances, powers, and musical identities, the symbolic weight they carry differs profoundly. One belongs to a world shaped by history, emotion, and growth. The other belongs to a world shaped by imagination, playfulness, and stylistic reinterpretation. Their symbolic positions reveal why they feel connected, yet fundamentally different. Marceline's symbolic role within U is deeply rooted in the history of the world. She represents survival, emotional endurance, and the lasting effect of time in a landscape shaped by destruction and transformation. As one of the oldest characters in the main timeline, she becomes a living reminder of the Mushroom War and the centuries that followed. Her presence bridges the past and the present, making her a symbol of continuity. She carries memories of a world that no longer exists, and her existence reflects the possibility of growth and healing despite profound loss. In this sense, Marceline symbolizes the emotional consequences of immortality. She shows what it means to live through eras of change, to outlast people you love, and to heal from wounds that time alone cannot fix. She embodies vulnerability hidden beneath strength, revealing that emotional survival requires both resilience and honesty. Her songs, her relationships, and her personal conflicts all highlight themes of memory, identity, and regeneration. She serves as a figure who represents the cost of longevity and the beauty found in reconnection. Marceline also symbolizes freedom. She lives outside the rules of kingdoms and hierarchies, embodying the spirit of Marceline, independence. Her sense of self is not dictated by social structures, but by personal experience. She contributes to the world without being bound by any single role. Her presence challenges the expectations placed upon her, showing that identity can be fluid and shaped by personal growth rather than external labels. This makes her an important symbol of individuality in a world shaped by diverse characters and perspectives. Her relationship with Princess Bubblegum adds another symbolic layer. Together, they represent the union of logic and emotion, science and creativity, structure and spontaneity. Their long journey toward understanding reflects the healing of wounds that once kept them apart. This relationship symbolizes the potential for reconciliation, emotional maturity, and the ability to rebuild connections after periods of conflict. Marceline's symbolic role becomes intertwined with the exploration of love in a world filled with both chaos and beauty. Marshall's symbolic role unfolds differently. Because he originates from the Fionna and Cake universe, his symbolism emerges through narrative purpose rather than emotional history. He represents inversion, fantasy, and stylized reinterpretation. Every aspect of his character reflects a playful twist on Marceline's traits, reshaped through the imaginative lens of the Ice King. His presence symbolizes the creative possibilities that arise when familiar identities are reimagined. Marshall functions as a symbol of storytelling itself. He embodies the idea that characters can be mirrored, inverted, or transformed based on the perspective of the storyteller. His identity reflects the Ice King's subconscious attempts to recreate elements of Marceline without fully understanding why she matters to him. This makes Marshall a symbol of memory distorted by magic, showing how affection can be expressed through creativity even when memory is lost. Because Marshall exists within a fictional universe inspired by the Ice King's imagination, he also symbolizes escapism. His confidence, charm, and stylized presence represent the appeal of a world unburdened by emotional consequence. He becomes a character who offers excitement, flair, and narrative energy. His symbolic purpose revolves around entertainment rather than emotional depth. This aligns with the tone of his universe, where characters exist to bring joy and intrigue rather than to confront heavy themes. Another aspect of Marshall's symbolic role is his representation of gender variation within mirrored universes. He illustrates how personality traits can shift when viewed through a different lens. His presence highlights the adaptability of identity in alternate worlds. This makes him a symbol of flexibility within narrative structure, showing how core traits can be reshaped into new forms. In this way, he becomes a creative expression of Marceline's essence rather than a direct parallel. Marshall also symbolizes the Ice King's longing for connection. Even though the crown prevents him from fully remembering Marceline, part of her lingers within his imagination. Marshall becomes the manifestation of that lingering presence. He reflects the emotional imprint Marceline left on Simon, even if Simon cannot access those memories consciously. This makes Marshall a symbol of lost emotional truth, reappearing in distorted form through creativity. The difference between their symbolic roles becomes especially clear when examining their connection to their worlds. Marceline's symbolism emerges from real emotional arcs tied to the history of U. Her presence influences the narrative by revealing the emotional cost of the past. Marshall's symbolism emerges from narrative framing. His presence influences the fictional universe by enhancing its stylistic appeal and thematic inversion. Marceline's symbolic role includes emotional transformation. She represents healing, forgiveness, and the ability to move forward despite pain. Her life spans eras that force her to grow, adapt, and confront her fears. This makes her symbolically tied to themes of renewal and resilience. Marshall does not carry this symbolic weight. His universe does not ask him to heal or confront emotional wounds. He symbolizes creativity rather than emotional survival. Another symbolic contrast lies in how each character embodies power. Marceline represents responsibility. Her powers come with emotional consequences and a long history tied to the Vampire King. Her strength symbolizes the balance between control and vulnerability. Marshall's powers symbolize aesthetic appeal. They enhance his presence without anchoring him to emotional conflict. This difference reflects the contrasting nature of their worlds. Marceline stands as a symbol of depth. Marshall stands as a symbol of style. Marceline embodies truth. Marshall embodies interpretation. Marceline reflects the emotional core of the main timeline. Marshall reflects the narrative creativity of a fantastical alternate universe. Together, their symbolic roles reveal how identity shifts when filtered through different forms of storytelling. This chapter deepens the understanding of their mirrored presence. In the next chapter, the comparison continues through an examination of how canon events shape their paths and how those paths diverge due to the nature of their worlds. The journeys of Marceline and Marshall continue to diverge when viewed through the lens of canon events. Marceline lives inside the core timeline of Adventure Time, where every major story arc leaves a lasting impression on her emotional development. Her life spans eras shaped by war, magic, loss, and renewal, and each event adds depth to her identity. Marshall, by contrast, exists within a fictional universe created by the Ice King, where events carry narrative flair but not emotional consequence. His world does not unfold through history or trauma. Instead, it exists as a playful reinterpretation shaped by imagination. These differences reveal how canon shapes one character through truth and the other through creative reinvention. Marceline's life begins in a world recovering from the Mushroom War. This event alone defines much of her emotional landscape. She grows up wandering through ruins, surrounded by the remnants of destruction. This period exposes her to danger, loneliness, and the struggle for survival. Unlike many characters in U, Marceline remembers the world before it transformed into the colourful environment of the modern timeline. This memory becomes part of her identity, shaping how she views the people and places around her. She knows what existed before the kingdoms rose, and she knows the emotional cost of living through a world in transition. Another defining canon event is her time with Simon Petrikov. Their bond influences every stage of Marceline's growth. Simon's gradual transformation into the Ice King becomes one of the most painful moments in her life. Marceline not only loses him, but she loses him in a way that leaves emotional scars. He disappears into a distorted version of himself, unable to recognize her or remember the bond they once shared. This event leaves Marceline with a lingering fear of losing those she cares about. It influences how she approaches relationships, how she hides vulnerability, and how she expresses affection cautiously. Canon events tied to the Vampire King also shape Marceline's trajectory. Her encounter with him leads to her gaining vampiric abilities and immortality. This transformation affects the entire course of her existence. It connects her to an ancient lineage of power and conflict that spans eras of Oo's history. Through her interactions with the Vampire King and other vampires, Marceline becomes part of a larger narrative about balance, danger, and identity. This history creates internal conflict, forcing her to navigate the burdens and responsibilities associated with her powers. Marceline's later involvement in major conflicts across Oo further shapes her emotional development. She participates in battles, confronts old enemies, reconnects with loved ones, and helps defend the world she has lived in for centuries. Events involving Princess Bubblegum, elemental forces, and magical threats all contribute to her growth. These events push her to confront fear, accept vulnerability, and rebuild trust. Each event leaves a lasting impact because Marceline lives in a world where actions carry emotional consequences. Her identity evolves as she learns from each experience. Her relationship with Princess Bubblegum becomes another key canon thread that defines her character. Their long history includes disagreements, emotional distance, attempts at reconciliation, and eventual renewal of their bond. The progression of this relationship reveals the impact of multiple canon moments that contribute to Marceline's emotional maturity. Every event between them adds to the foundation of trust they eventually rebuild. This relationship cannot be separated from the canon events that shape it, making it one of the most important elements of Marceline's personal story. Marshall's universe follows a different path. The Fionna and Cake timeline does not evolve through the weight of history. Its events arise from narrative invention rather than emotional truth. Marshall's world exists because the Ice King creates stories for his own entertainment and comfort. This means that events in Marshall's world do not carry the same emotional or historical weight. They reflect the tone of a fictionalized universe where drama and humor take precedence over emotional continuity. Because of this, Marshall does not experience the aftermath of the Mushroom War. He does not grow up in ruins or live through eras of transformation. His identity is not shaped by loss or survival. He exists in a world designed to reinterpret the tone of Oo without carrying its trauma. This lack of historical weight allows Marshall to remain consistent in personality. He does not confront emotional arcs tied to past events, nor does he undergo significant personal change as a result of narrative developments. His relationship with Fionna reflects this design. Their interactions follow the playful energy of a fictional story. They tease, challenge, and charm each other, but these moments do not reflect centuries of history or emotional wounds. Their bond is immediate rather than long-term. It does not evolve through significant canon events, and it does not require emotional reconciliation. Instead, it fits the rhythm of storytelling shaped by the Ice King's imagination. Canon events in the Fionna and Cake universe also lack the emotional gravity found in the main timeline. Battles, conflicts, and adventures occur for narrative excitement rather than character growth. Marshall participates in these events as part of the stylized role he fulfills. His identity remains intact because his world does not require internal change. This contrast highlights the difference between emotional storytelling and narrative performance. Another significant difference lies in the stability of each timeline. Oo develops through shifting balances of magic, political tensions, ancient forces, and episodes of chaos. Marceline must navigate this instability. She adapts to changes as kingdoms rise and fall. She witnesses transformations in the world that force her to evolve emotionally. In contrast, the Fionna and Cake universe contains a more stable, simplified structure. It does not develop through centuries of history or reflect the emotional cost of survival. This allows Marshall's role to remain consistent. His universe does not pressure him to change because its events do not carry lasting consequences. Marshall's identity is further influenced by the fact that his world originates within the Ice King's mind. Canon events involving the Ice King indirectly shape Marshall's existence. For example, Simon's fragmented memories of Marceline influence Marshall's design. Yet these influences appear as creative reinterpretations, not emotional arcs. Marshall becomes a trace of Simon's memory, expressed through fiction. He reflects emotional residue rather than direct involvement in canon history. This means Marshall is shaped by the absence of memory rather than by remembered truth. The contrast between the weight of canon in each universe reveals why Marceline and Marshall feel so different. Marceline becomes complex because she exists within a world where events matter. She grows, heals, learns, and confronts internal conflict because the story requires her to evolve. Marshall remains consistent because his world does not require emotional development. He reflects the light-hearted tone of a fictional interpretation rather than the emotional reality of a lived timeline. Marceline's identity is shaped by hardships that change her. Marshall's identity is shaped by imagination that designs him. Marceline's story unfolds through emotional truth. Marshall's story unfolds through narrative invention. Marceline carries the impact of canon events in every aspect of her personality. Marshall carries the stylistic energy of a world unconcerned with emotional continuity. This chapter shows how canon shapes identity in entirely different ways across universes. In the next chapter, the focus shifts to the legacies they leave within their worlds, revealing another layer of their mirrored design. Legacy is shaped by the impact a character leaves on the world around them, and in the comparison between Marceline and Marshall, this difference becomes striking. Marceline's legacy forms naturally through centuries of life, through relationships that change and through emotional contributions that resonate across the entire timeline. Marshall's legacy forms through narrative influence rather than history. He becomes a symbol of creativity and reinterpretation within the fictional universe, but his presence does not alter the structural or emotional landscape of his world. By understanding how each character leaves a mark on their universe, the mirror between them reveals two very different forms of influence. Marceline's legacy begins with her survival through the most destructive era in the history of the world. She is one of the few characters who remembers what came before the rise of Oo's kingdoms. Her memories of the post-war world give her unique insight into the origins of the land, and her perspective becomes part of Oo's emotional foundation. Her stories, experiences, and reactions carry historical significance because she lived through moments that shaped the world that exists in the present. This alone marks her as a figure of profound importance, connecting past and present in a way few others can. Her legacy deepens through the relationships she forms. Marceline influences many of the central characters in Oo over the course of their lives. Her connection with Simon forms one of the emotional pillars of the timeline. Their bond represents resilience, protection, loss, and healing. The effect of their relationship echoes through Simon's transformation and eventual redemption. Even when Simon cannot consciously remember their history, Marceline's influence remains within him, proving that emotional connections can leave marks even when memory fades. Marceline's relationship with Princess Bubblegum becomes another significant part of her legacy. Together, they represent emotional growth, forgiveness, and the ability to rebuild connections after long periods of pain and misunderstanding. Their journey illustrates how relationships can heal when two people confront their past honestly. Marceline's influence on Princess Bubblegum encourages PB to balance logic with emotional openness, while PB's influence helps Marceline understand stability and trust. Their connection forms one of the central emotional threads in Adventure Time, and their reconciliation becomes part of the broader story of healing within Ooh. Her friendships with Finn and Jake also add to her legacy. By guiding, teasing, supporting, and occasionally challenging them, Marceline becomes an influential figure in their lives. She serves as the older friend who understands the world in a way few others can. Her presence enriches their emotional maturity, offering lessons that contribute to their growth. Because Marceline has lived through so much, her perspective helps ground them during moments of confusion or conflict. In this way, she becomes part of their personal histories as well. Marceline's musical influence should not be overlooked. Her songs carry emotional truth that resonates with characters and viewers alike. Through music, she expresses personal emotions that reflect broader themes within the narrative. Her influence as a musician becomes a defining part of Ooh's cultural identity. Songs become memories. Performances become shared experiences. Her music echoes throughout the timeline, leaving a legacy that spans emotional and artistic realms. Her interactions with magical forces also contribute to her legacy. The events involving the Vampire King, various vampires, and other supernatural beings connect Marceline to the mystical history of Ooh. She becomes a representative of balance within this world, carrying the powers of the Vampire King while maintaining a deeply human, emotional core. This duality forms a unique part of her legacy, showing that identities shaped by power can still be grounded in compassion and emotional truth. Marceline's role in major conflicts further expands her influence. She participates in the defense of Ooh, confronting threats that endanger the world she calls home. Even when she is not the central hero of these battles, her presence contributes to the collective strength of those who protect the land. Her courage, determination, and emotional intelligence help unite characters who might otherwise struggle to stand together. She represents the idea that strength can arise from vulnerability as much as from power. Her legacy also surfaces in the emotional tone she brings to the story. Marceline embodies themes of memory, loss, resilience, and reconnection. She shows that even after centuries of loneliness or emotional distance, healing remains possible. She proves that relationships can be rebuilt, identities can evolve, and emotional wounds can close with time. This symbolic legacy adds depth to Ooh's emotional landscape, reminding viewers and characters that complexity is part of being alive. Marshall's legacy unfolds differently. Because he exists within a fictional universe created by the Ice King, his influence does not change the history or emotional structure of his world. Instead, his legacy emerges from the role he plays within storytelling itself. He becomes a significant character within the Fionna and Cake universe, but his presence reflects narrative creativity rather than historical impact. Marshall becomes an example of how characters can be reimagined. His existence shows how qualities from one universe can transform when placed in another. He embodies the flexibility of identity across alternate worlds. This becomes his symbolic legacy. He demonstrates how narrative reinterpretation can create new versions of familiar characters while retaining essential traits. This aspect of his identity resonates with the theme of creativity that defines the Fionna and Cake universe. Marshall also leaves a mark through his role as a charismatic figure. His energy adds excitement, humor, and flair to the narrative. His interactions with Fiona and other characters contribute to the tone of the fictional world, helping shape its aesthetic. This becomes part of his legacy. He influences the universe by enriching its atmosphere rather than altering its history. His presence helps define the playful identity of the alternate world. Another part of Marshall's legacy lies in the emotional imprint he represents. Because the Ice King creates him based on fragmented memories of Marceline, Marshall becomes a symbol of lost emotional connection. He reflects the idea that memories can survive in unexpected forms. Even if the Ice King cannot consciously recall Marceline's past with him, something about her remains within him, expressed through his creation of Marshall. This gives Marshall a subtle but meaningful legacy connected to the emotional tragedy of Simon's transformation. He becomes a reminder of a bond that persists through altered memory. Marshall's legacy also speaks to the creative possibilities within Adventure Time's storytelling structure. He proves that alternate universe characters can stand on their own while still reflecting deeper themes from the main timeline. His presence shows how stories can branch into multiple directions, allowing new interpretations to coexist with canonical truth. This adds richness to the broader narrative landscape. Yet despite these creative contributions, Marshall does not leave a legacy that influences the structure of his universe in the way Marceline does. He does not shape centuries of history. He does not bridge emotional eras. He does not guide major characters through long-term growth. His influence remains stylistic and narrative rather than historical and emotional. This difference underscores how environment determines the form a character's legacy takes. Together, their legacies reveal the deepest contrast between them. Marceline leaves a mark on her world because she lives within it, contributes to its history, and evolves alongside it. Marshall leaves a mark on his world because he embodies creative reinterpretation, adding flair to a universe shaped by imagination. This contrast shows how two characters can mirror each other while playing entirely different roles within their worlds. Their legacies highlight the emotional truth of one and the narrative creativity of the other. This understanding sets the stage for the final chapter, where the mirror between them is reflected in full. Marceline and Marshall stand on opposite sides of a mirror that stretches across two universes. One universe is real within the logic of Adventure Time, defined by history, emotion, and evolution. The other is fictional within that same logic, defined by imagination, reinterpretation, and stylistic flair. The comparison between them reveals how identity takes shape in different environments and how storytelling reshapes elements of a character when transported from emotional truth into creative fantasy. By examining everything that connects and separates them, the final picture becomes clear. Marceline represents the truth of experience. Marshall represents the idea of experience transformed into narrative expression. Marceline's life unfolds through centuries of real events. She experiences loss, love, fear, healing, and growth. Her story contains emotional consequences because she lives through true change. Her identity shifts as she navigates challenges that test her strength and vulnerability. Each moment she endures becomes part of the emotional landscape she carries. Her powers, relationships, and internal conflicts all reflect this truth. The world around her shapes her in ways that cannot be simplified. She becomes an anchor to Oo's history, a symbol of how the past echoes through the present, and a reminder that healing is possible even when scars remain. Marshall's existence arises from imagination rather than reality. The world he inhabits forms through the Ice King's creative impulses, influenced by fragmented memories and the desire to craft a universe filled with excitement and charm. Marshall does not carry the weight of centuries. He does not know what it means to survive destruction or to outlive loved ones. His identity is shaped by style and narrative purpose. His charm reflects personality traits drawn from Marceline, but reinterpreted through a playful lens. His presence symbolizes creativity rather than emotional endurance. He becomes a character designed to entertain, not to evolve through emotional truth. The mirror between them highlights these differences while revealing their shared essence. Marceline represents the authentic self shaped by lived experience. Marshall represents an external interpretation shaped by storytelling. Within this reflection lies a subtle tragedy. Marshall is influenced by the Ice King's distorted memories of Marceline. Even though Simon cannot consciously remember the past he shared with her, pieces of her remain within him, resurfacing through the characters he creates. Marshall becomes an echo of Marceline's presence, a reflection shaped not by truth but by the emotional residue that survives memory loss. This link forms an unspoken connection that adds depth to both characters. Understanding their mirrored presence requires acknowledging how each universe defines identity. Ooh demands growth, introspection, and emotional resilience. Characters evolve because the world changes and challenges them. Marceline becomes who she is because she must adapt to survive. Her emotional maturity comes from confronting her past, rebuilding relationships, and learning to trust again. Every bond she forms carries meaning, rooted in shared experience. The Fionna and Cake universe demands narrative consistency and stylistic personality. Characters remain stable because the world exists for entertainment. Marshall's energy remains expressive and confident because narrative function shapes him. His relationships reflect playful charm rather than emotional depth. He thrives within a universe that does not require evolution. This gives him a distinct identity that feels vibrant but not weighed down by the complexities of real history. Another contrast emerges in how each character expresses vulnerability. Marceline reveals vulnerability through music, quiet confession, and moments of emotional honesty. She hides her feelings behind humor only when she fears being hurt again. When she opens up, the moment carries deep meaning because it reflects centuries of fear and healing. Marshall's vulnerability appears as part of his theatrical presence. It highlights his charisma rather than revealing emotional wounds. His moments of softness enhance his persona rather than shaping his internal world. This difference reveals how emotional truth functions differently in each universe. Their powers also reflect their universes. Marceline's vampirism carries the weight of history. She inherits abilities tied to the Vampire King and becomes part of a lineage that shaped eras of conflict. Her powers come with responsibility, emotional complexity, and a need to reconcile her identity with her past. Marshall's vampirism enhances his cool image. His powers exist to elevate his presence within a fictional narrative. They reflect aesthetic rather than emotional significance. This difference shows how the same traits can carry entirely different meanings depending on the world around them. Even their relationships highlight the mirror between authenticity and reinterpretation. Marceline's connections grow through emotional truth. She faces conflict, misunderstanding, reconciliation, and healing. Her relationships evolve because she evolves. She becomes more open with Princess Bubblegum, more trusting with Finn and Jake, and more self-aware as she confronts her past with Simon. These connections shape her identity in profound ways. Marshall's relationships follow narrative rhythm. He interacts with Fionna and others through charm and playfulness. Their bonds reflect the energy of a world built for fun. These interactions do not evolve through long arcs or emotional complexity. They remain consistent because his universe does not require change. This difference reveals how relationships are shaped by the nature of a world. Marceline's relationships carry emotional weight. Marshall's relationships carry narrative flavor. The contrast between their legacies continues this pattern. Marceline leaves a lasting impact on Wu. Her stories influence the people around her, the history she lived through, and the cultural memory of the world. She becomes a symbol of resilience and healing. Marshall leaves an impact on his fictional universe by enhancing its expressive identity. He becomes a symbol of reinterpretation, showing how characters can transform when viewed through a different lens. His legacy exists within storytelling rather than within history. Yet despite all these differences, the mirror between them reveals an undeniable connection. Marshall exists because Marceline exists. He reflects her through the creative distortion of Simon's mind. His presence shows that even when memory is lost, emotional impressions can find new forms. This connection adds a bittersweet undertone to their mirrored relationship. Marshall is not a replacement for Marceline. He is a reflection of the emotional weight she once held in Simon's life, filtered through imagination and storytelling. Together, Marceline and Marshall illustrate one of the central themes of Adventure Time. Identity is shaped by the world we inhabit, yet it can also transform through creativity and interpretation. Marceline shows the complexity of identity forged through truth. Marshall shows the possibility of identity reshaped through narrative. Their mirror reveals how characters can share traits while diverging completely in meaning. This reflection across universes offers a deeper understanding of how Adventure Time explores storytelling. It shows that even within alternate worlds, emotional echoes remain. It shows that reinterpretation can honor truth while transforming it. It shows that characters can reflect each other while standing apart. Marceline stands as the emotional core shaped by life. Marshall stands as the creative reflection shaped by imagination. Together, they form a pair whose connection enriches both worlds.